Whereas developed countries embraced e-learning way before the outbreak of COVID-19, developing countries like Uganda slightly lagged behind. When schools closed in 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the only solution for students and pupils to catch up could only be by online education. Questions that arose were how would students be assessed, the Q&A between a student and the teacher, as well as the home environment serenity for studies. The recently released PLE examination results is a good assessment for learners of e-learning generation. Meet Rebecca Blessing Warakira, who has just completed her P7 at Green Hill Academy, Buwate. At her school, 70% of the final syllabus was covered online.
At first, I didn't know how to use most of the stuff, but as I continued, it became easy to use and more convenient. Usually I used to wake up very early to do the work, but as I continued, some of the lessons weren't that early, so I could wake up at the time that the lessons were starting. And the disadvantage would be that sometimes it had network issues with the teachers, but other times it was good and you could do it at any time if you wanted to.
Having scored 4 aggregates, Warakila claims it wasn't a bed of roses, balancing online studies with home errands.
People weren't understanding, so we could repeat the topics many times. But I think because we also had to go to school, it became easier to do the Zoom lessons without having to repeat topics, because if you didn't understand a topic, you could get to know about the topic from school.
The costs that come along studying online with gadgets used, one can say a high-end student can easily cope up. Professor Olakla says in such pandemics, government needs to subsidize on internet costs as well as extend both the networks and gadgets to the less privileged.
But it requires careful planning and also to make these opportunities available for the rest of the students to represent a huge investment and big policy decisions on part of government.
Zoe Chomuhendo, a former pupil of Kaboja Junior, says that e-learning at home reduced on the pressure at school and one could do it at their own convenience.
The experience was tough, waking up in the morning and then logging in. Sometimes there wouldn't be like data for us to enter the class, and then you had to take breakfast, and it was just too much, I guess. Teachers would be asking you questions, and if you haven't attended the past lessons, you wouldn't understand, and there weren't any recorded lessons or anything, so yeah, some topics were not entirely exhausted.
For Joseph Kakumba of St. Anthony Kajansi, scoring aggregate 8 given the nature of learning during the pandemic is indeed a blessing.
That was also a problem, like buying data, paying OTT. By that time, OTT was still there, so we had also to pay it, and that was also another problem. And another problem could be disturbance from siblings and parents. As you're doing work online, like they can call you and then you do something else. Those are the major challenges I faced.
Whereas e-learning appears to offer an answer to not only enabling learning to continue where education has been disrupted, but also offer opportunities for overcoming geographical access and rigidities of conventional education. The vital question, however, is that if 80% of Uganda's aged children and youth living in rural areas, characterized with lack of basic living resources and weak education and supporting infrastructure, then an uphill task stands to realize equal competitiveness covering the syllabus.